Well, thank you for having us. We really do appreciate the opportunity that the conference has given us to come and share our story of the interfaith work that's going on in Omaha, Nebraska. Just for a show of hands, how many of you have already sat through one of our presentations? Okay, so quite a few of you. We had, at least there we had pictures. Slides are worth 1,000 words, so we had pictures to go on. But, so we don't want to bore those who have gone before, but maybe we'll just briefly, for those of you who haven't been to the presentation and have not heard of the Tri-Faith Initiative in Omaha, we can maybe just briefly describe what we've been doing there since 2006. I think because John has to leave, we want to let him get in a certain number of words, and so maybe we'll let him start with just who Temple Israel is, and maybe real quickly about how
we're the Jews in Omaha. Omaha's got rabbi. It says in your program I'm a rabbi. I'm not. I own a public warehouse and a trucking company. I'm basically
close enough, John.
I'm on the lay leadership of Temple Israel in Omaha. We're the Reformed Jewish synagogue there. Omaha's got about 6,000 Jews. There's one of each denomination of congregation. So there's an Orthodox, a Conservative, a Reform, a Reconstructionist, and a Chabad. So we're the biggest. We have about 700 families. And we've been there, again, since 1871. We've been there the longest. Our current facility was built in 1955. It was built for 300 families, so we've more than outgrown it. Twice during our history, we've added on to it. So back in 2003, we were looking at adding on again, tearing it down and rebuilding, or relocating to a new site with either a new facility or an existing facility. I was put on that committee to look for land. We went looking for land for quite a long time. Fast forward to finally finding land, we identified 25 to 30 sites eventually. Originally, we were looking for 10 to 12 acres for our own site, and as it turned out, we have a unique location where we're at. Across the street is a church, next to us is a community playhouse, and we're adjacent to a really nice residential area, so there's this neighborhood feeling. So one of the past presidents, Bob Freeman, who is the chair of the Tri-Faith Initiative, went out seeking another faith group who might be in the same position that we are, and one thing led to another, and found Syed and the Muslim community, and they started talking, and one meeting led to another meeting, and it led to some more people, and they decided we maybe should include Christian people in this discussion and what it might become, and so that's how Bob then found Tim, and I'll push it to you.
Okay. We usually, when we do our presentations, we do them historically. Jews, Christians, Muslims, that's just one of our quirks we decided to do. And when we started this, I was canon for the ordinary when this came about in 2006. And I've told this story a couple times before, but Bishop Burnett came in my office one day and put this letter on my desk and said, "I'm not sure what this is about, but it's a local attorney. He belongs to Temple Israel. I'd like to talk to me, but I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks. Would you mind contacting him?" Of course, it's just, "Oh, yes, no problem, Bishop."
Right answer.
Yeah. It turns out, Bob and I are very good friends now. It turns out Bob and I are both golfers. We found that out right away, so we didn't care whether we were Jewish or Muslim. We were golfers. So our first meeting happened on a golf course. I said, "Well, let's just get together and play around the golf and talk about what you want to talk about." And it was exciting because they'd already talked to the Muslim community, and
did you let him win?
No. But there's some debate about this now.
I see.
But we do know by the 5th hole we could have really cared less who was winning because we were both pretty excited about what was going on. So that's how the Episcopal Church first got involved in this. Actually, we are the whole diocese, the whole state of Nebraska. We have about 56 parishes. Across the diocese, we had 9 congregations in the Omaha metro area. It was in our strategy to try to have another congregation in West Omaha. We had ground that purchased already in West Omaha, but this sounded much more exciting. So we said, yes, we would begin this search for property that would hold at least these 3 faith communities. But Dr. Mooding was in on the very first conversations with Temple, so I'll let him tell you that story real quick.
As Tim said, that Rabbi Azriel and Tim and Bob, who led this effort from the very beginning, approached the Muslim community in Omaha to establish at least jointly Muslim and Jewish faith prayer halls. But at the same time, the Muslim group was looking to expand, and we had plans, thoughts about building an Islamic institute, which would not simply be a prayer hall, but also serve as educational, social, and cultural center for Omaha community. So this really gave us an ideal position to look for a land which would be large enough to meet our needs and also meet the needs of the Jewish and as well as the Christian community. And we wholeheartedly proceeded with the project. And I've told this story before, and I'll try it again, and maybe this will be a better version. Our first meeting with Rabbi and Bob was in a public setting of a library in Omaha. And before we introduced ourselves, we sort of noticed that each group had brought food. And that has become the sort of center of our communication and discussions. As you like to call it, we talk more about kitchens than we talk about the business.
Right. Yeah, we decided we needed 4 kitchens. Because there was at one time they were talking, could we build a building that all 3 of these spaces could use? That didn't last very long, but that was the major decision. We needed 4 kitchens. We needed 4 worship spaces. We were not trying to mingle these religions together, but we wanted to be in intentional proximity of one another to show the world that this could work if we just worked hard enough at it, that we could live together. And that's always been one of our big words is intentionality.
So we have time for questions and all. You want to talk about how we got to, just briefly for the people who don't know.
Sure. Yeah, just quick.
So basically, we were looking for land. It took us many years. Literally, it took us 5 years to find the right site.
Not 40.
Yeah. Temple was looking for land since 2003, and we were looking for 10 acres. And as Tri-Faith started searching, we were looking for like a 40-acre site, which was quite a bit different. We ended up on what was the Jewish Country Club. Highland Country Club was originally established because the Jews were excluded from the country clubs in Omaha, and one thing led to another. The golf course became not only Jewish, it was a mixed country club. Most of the Jews still went there. In the 1990s, it kind of failed, and it became Ironwood Country Club, and then Ironwood failed. Ironwood had a note they owed the bank. The bank was owned by a very prominent Episcopalian family in town, and we thought that the bank would take the land back and we would give it. As it turned out, the land was purchased at auction by a developer, so we all went to the developer
And actually, the developer came to us, which was kind of unique.
Right.
Said, we've heard about your project.
About you,
we think
because we were out
this will be
looking
a
for
great
40-acre sites, and it seemed logical. So the site is on 40 acres of a 168-acre site. It's going to be a mixed-use site. It's going to be really nice. There were three lakes on the golf course, and those lakes were turned into a creek. The creek is called Hell's Creek. Hell's Creek actually bisects the land, and we're on one side of it, and the other 3 buildings are on the other side. This is kind of the way it laid out. And we intend to build a bridge over it called Heaven's Bridge over Hell's Creek, and that's kind of how it is. We think that it's having not been able to find a site that a lot of good things that allowed our community to wrestle with this and come to grips with it and really start to buy into the Tri-Faith concept. And also it allowed us to end up on this site, which is really perfect, to be honest with you. And it's kind of apropos that the site that was originally for Jews who were excluded, it might now be one of the more inclusive projects that the city will know. So we're really excited about it, and the building's going on, and I don't know how much you want to talk about that versus the concept of what we're doing with relationships.
Help us understand, if we were going to start the kind of ministry that you have, the kind of gatherings that you have. If we were going to start that in our communities, how we might go about doing that?
I will tell you, it takes...
Start with food. I'm with that, yes.
We have recipes.
We have, okay.
You know, we've been discussing this, and I mentioned it in the last one. I didn't mention it in the first one, but we've actually been documenting everything we've done. So we recognized years ago, as we started going down this path, that somebody may want to recreate this, and so wouldn't it be great to have some sort of a roadmap? So we actually are doing that officially, and we've taken video, and we're keeping blog, and we're keeping documents and records, and so on and so forth. The other thing that we're doing is we've involved a person who's a life coach and a business coach and a leadership development person. She's actually fascinated. She's from a group called Vistage. I don't know if any of you know that. That's an organization I'm in. And she's fascinated by the conversations around the table and how it goes. And she and I have had a lot of discussions about it. And I will tell you, anybody going into this is not easy at all. This is difficult. We started with it started with food, of course, it started friendly, but it very quickly went into some serious conversations, into the things that might become problems, and how do we deal with this, and how do we separate that, and we created a memorandum of understanding back in 2006 that we all basically agreed to and abide by, and anybody else who wants to come join the fund also needs to understand that that's kind of the ground rules. The other thing that she and I talked about was it takes a lot of emotional and creative intelligence especially to do it and to persevere for the 6 or 7 years that we have done that. It takes people who are really committed, which I know all of you are, as to the kind of work you do, so here we are preaching to the choir, but that's what it takes. It takes people who are committed, that understand it, that can set their own personal agendas aside and work for the common good. It's been a creative, it's really been an interesting creative thing, and what it's done for me and for all of us is that it has taken me, who is not clergy, who is not even lay clergy, I'm lay leaders in the synagogue. It has taken and strengthened my religion and my ability to understand intellectually other religions, other points of view, and know that we're all trying to get to the same place with different methodologies. So,
can you give us some examples of the ground rules? You said you entered into some ground rules quite early on.
I got it right here.
Yeah. Well, unlike some dialogues, and the only reason, first of all, and we said this in every presentation, we weren't here to really teach anybody anything. A lot of you folks have been doing this ecumenical interfaith work longer than we have, and much more involved. We've been blessed with just a situation, the opportunity to do this, and the personnel who are involved in it. And not every community is going to be that blessed. But there are ways that people can engage, and what we're trying to do now, in fact, is we are going to be taking Tri-Faith on the road to the Diocese of Nebraska, the Synod of Nebraska, all the ELCA parishes and Episcopal parishes. We're going to 5 different locations across the diocese to at least tell folks what we're doing, where it is, because they're all interested in how are we coming with this project, they all know about it. But then to try to offer them some resources of how they might begin dialogues in their own communities, where they may have some Muslims or some Jews. How can they do that, and where the resources are, and what help we could be to them? Because this is, as far as we know, it's unique in all the world that this is the only intentional build of these 3 faith groups and a Tri-Faith Center. And that's why the buildings are fairly important to us, because they're the icons. They're I've said this before, but these are wonderful conferences. We need to continue to have conferences with scholars and clergy. But we know that when these conferences are over, most of us go back to the room, we pack our bag, we get on our plane, we fly home. This unique opportunity is to say, you know what, when we get up the next morning, guess what? My neighbor to the right is still Jewish, my neighbor to the left is still Muslim, and as a Christian I have to learn, how do I love my neighbor as myself? How do we help people in the pews and the prayer rugs, learn to do that? And this has been a very, I think, lay-led initiative. It has not been driven mainly by clergy. I mean, Rabbi and I have been very much involved in it, our bishops have. but still the majority
I think
of
it's been a
people
shared
have been, it's been a shared ministry, but very much lately. You want to give an example?
Sure. One other thing I wanted to say was, we agreed from the very beginning to be separate and together at the same time. We agreed that all of us would have our own prayers, place of prayer. We would be responsible for the raising funds and building. And there is no commingling of either prayers or other services. A great example is when in 2009 we had a dinner and discussion session with the leaders of the three faiths. And the overriding theme was there are differences among us, but there are commonalities. We are branches of a tree, and we really are raised together. But the belief that we can share knowledge from each other, share our passions, share our ambitions and our hopes and worries and the difficulties we have in the rest of the world as well as here will not allow us to defeat us.
One of the main, we started with the tough questions, like, okay, what about proselytizing? If we're going to be, doing this, how's that going to work? It's not on the campus. We're going to be very considerate of even signage that we put up, those kinds of things. People that want to come and play with us on our campus have to agree with the memorandum of understanding. And I tell my Christian community, I said, if you want to live out your baptismal covenant, love your neighbor as yourself, respect the dignity of every human being, strive for justice and peace, if that's not proselytizing, that's simply just living out your Christian calling. And that's what we intend to do. To provide radical hospitality for those who want to come and join in, and to just basically be who they are. And I think the Muslims and Jews are both saying they're going to live out their faith as it was intended to live out.
How Anglican is your Christianity? How Reformed is your Judaism?
Personally, or my
The community.
congregation?
When they're invited, do they say, "Oh, I can tell this is Reformed"?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're a member of the URJ, which is Union for Reformed Judaism, and we are very much a URJ congregation. So there are Reformed congregations that are kind of off on their own and do their own thing and whatever, but if you went to our congregation to services or to a bar mitzvah or something like that, and you went to another URJ or you were familiar with one in your own city, then you would very much know that we are a URJ Reformed.
And if I were going to the Christian community, there'd be the Eucharist.
Yes, there'd be the Eucharist. Yeah, and I think you have to realize, we have 56 congregations, we have 9 in the metro area. Some of those are high church, some are low church, some are middle church. This one is that I'm raising up right now because I've left Canada the ordinary position to do this. I would say we have folks that are kind of come from all those 3 traditions, but their driving concern is to be in ecumenical and interfaith work. And for our Christian piece, we soon realized that we had to be doing even more ecumenical work in this than even interfaith if we were going to do this right. The Episcopal Church cannot represent Christianity. We weren't ever going to try to do that. So we have really reached out and invited other Christian denominations, especially ELCA, because of our full community to participate in this. But we have Roman Catholics and Presbyterians. Yes?
When the Jewish congregation was looking for a partner congregation in the Christian community, did you send letters to all denominations and it just happened to be that the Episcopalians responded? Or
No,
did you specifically go to the Episcopal Church, and why?
We actually started with the Catholic Archdiocese. At the time, the bishop was Eldon Curtis in Omaha, and we also approached Father Val Peter, who was the priest at Boys Town. Due to a lot of reasons and circumstances, the fact that they weren't growing, they weren't expanding, there was no plans for that in their budgets or economics of it. Some of the politics, Bishop Curtis was nearing the end of his time and knew he was going to be retiring and moving on and so on. It just wasn't the right time for them. Bob Freeman, who met with us at first, who was our past president, who was very involved in this, is married to a non-Jew, to an Episcopalian. And that was the connection to the Episcopal Church. And that's how.
And there was one other story though, yeah. A rabbi happened to be attending a rabbi's conference up in Minneapolis just shortly after they'd gone to the Roman Catholic Church and turned down. And Barbara Graham Taylor was there. And she was at lunch with Rabbi one day. And he was telling her how they had this dream of doing this with the three faces, but the Roman Catholics weren't interested. And she immediately said, well, have you invited the Episcopal Church to it? So, yeah. So, thank God they turned us down. We're lucky.
Can you address the issue, especially in this context where there's such positive endorsement, what sort of opposition you may have encountered in each three of your communities and how you dealt with that?
I'll start first and you hand it over to John. Why don't you go first? Because you got a longer story.
I have a long story. So, during all this time, I was on the I've been on the board of Temple since 1997, and I'm in my last year, or I will be in my last year next year. During the time when we got together with Tri-Faith, I was the president-elect. And when I became president, I had to step off the Tri-Faith board because we decided for conflict of interest and a bunch of other reasons we didn't want the president serving on this board. One of the biggest struggles I had was understanding and coming to the realization that everybody was not in favor of this. And our struggle was to uproot a congregation who'd been there for 55 years, move them 7 miles down the road, which was a struggle in itself, not even before we introduced the complication of Tri-Faith. People wanted to stay, people thought we should stay in the neighborhood, we're deserting, we would be the last, we're the only synagogue that's east of a certain dividing line in town, and now we'd be near all the other ones, and it just, some people didn't like it at all. And the struggle that we had was real. I mean, people had their fears because through ignorance or they didn't know or weren't interested in finding out or whatever, and that was the toughest thing for me. And that's when I found really my spirituality and really learned from this. And I learned that, everybody has their feelings, and all we could do would be there to try and help them through it and to offer programming and so on and so forth. So during the time that we kept looking for ground and it didn't happen, we were, I don't want to say nothing more than just another dialogue going on, but until we had some land and until we had some real permanence to what we're doing, we were just another dialogue. And during the time of having these dialogues and having people understand, we were able to come to the right piece of ground, and we were also able to get many, many more of our congregants involved in the programs and to see that things can work together, that the youth groups can get together and so on and so forth. So it was a struggle, it still is one, every now and then there's still some people that are not in favor of it, but little by little it's like, how can you not be for something like this? And if you don't want to participate, you don't participate, but you don't become a detractor like we had at the beginning. And so we have far fewer detractors and just some people who just don't want to do it, but not nearly as many as we did.
Well, they had enough of them to raise $23 million in a few months, so that's great. But all of us were in a different spot. Rabbi and John's job was to move this family to a new house, and try to keep all the members of the family going. And I don't think we lost a member, which is amazing. Episcopal Church, we didn't have a congregation to move out there, so we're raising up a new one. The Islamic Center is the same way. This is a new congregation, but a new prayer hall and institute. So we're all in those different places in our journey together. The Episcopal Church, well, I think I had one Episcopalian come up to me and say they weren't sure they were for this. And we had a long talk, and when we got through with that talk, she was saying, I don't know if I will attend out there, but I think it's okay. We know there's other Christians that think this is, And in fact, what's interesting, we have classes after our Eucharist every Sunday night, and usually there are some comparative religion, or we have Muslims and Jews and other Christians come in and dialogue with us. And we had a group of really radical, I would say radical Christians, come in, and they thought they were infiltrating our meetings to see what we were doing. They were usually fake names, false emails,
Oh, great.
everything, you know? And the trouble was is we knew who they were. And we were nice to them, and that really, I don't know, I think that took them back a little bit. It was, come back anytime, love to have you.
The Muslim community in Omaha is relatively small. And actually, at this time, we really don't have a place large enough to accommodate everybody. So actually, this new place of worship institution is something which the Muslim community is looking forward to. It doesn't mean that everybody fully supports the idea of tri-faith, but similar to what John said, when the building actually be built and be seen in the context of the tri-faith, I think it will have a very welcome reception.
So how do you deal with difficult issues? Like difficult political issues?
Palestine.
Actually, John has,
I'll tell you later. Yeah.
John has never been able to deal with it.
It kind of disappears when that happens?
Exactly.
Thank you, John.
No, I do have to
Thank
leave.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
For those of you who didn't get to come in and see the little, we ran a little 8-minute video, and part of that is we showed our big first event that we did as a tri-faith initiative was Abraham's tent. We did it at the Quest Center in Omaha. We had about 1,200 people show up. We had presiding Bishop Captain Jeffrey Shorey and David Mattson and Rabbi Noble there. But right before this took place, the Gaza war broke out. And that really concerned us. We'd gone to all this work. We thought, oh, gee, are we even going to be able to have this now? You know? We said, of course we are. And we need to respond to this. And I think I told one of the groups, you know, in my 26-some years of ministry, the 3 hours I spent with Rabbi Israel and Nasser al-Sharif. Rabbi's, his parents still live in Israel. Nasser's from Palestine. His family was removed from Palestine. The three of us sat down and composed this editorial. And for 3 hours, I mean, we literally laughed and cried and shared. And it was amazing. But as we said, we were able to respond to that in a way that didn't take sides, that talked about the real issues of justice and peace, not the political and economic issues. And I think one of the things that we have been very good at is we have tried valiantly to say what we are about is our faith. And political and economic issues will be out there. We know everything. Every time something happens in the Middle East, something happens somewhere with a Muslim involved, or a Jew involved, or a Christian involved, it will affect us, and we will have to deal with that. But we're trying to do it as one voice.
I'm just struck by the fact that, you know, you talk about, we have an interfaith council, and the Palestine-Israel issue divides it on a regular basis. But the difference is our people don't have investments in buildings. So we literally can walk back to the separate parts of Milwaukee we're from and not see each other till the next meeting. And that's very different.
You know, and I think as I think about it, when we say we're intentional and we're going to be there, that's true. I mean, you know, we're investing a lot of money, and we're not going to build walkways. We have to learn how to live with each other and do it in a way that shows the world a better place. I think we can, but it will be challenging. Well, it's interesting you asked about people protesting. When this all went through the city planning and the development and all that, and we went to many meetings where there were lots of public testimony, and we only had one voice. And it happened to be, I think, the day after there was something that happened in Seattle at one of the mosques or something, and this guy brought that up. And everybody just kind of looked at him, and it was like, so part of it is the community that we're in. And I think this is important, is that the personalities that are involved are wonderful people, but also we are in a community that's not that large. We all have about the same populations involved in this. You know, we have about 6,000 Episcopalians in Omaha. We have about that many Jews in Omaha. We have a few less Muslims in Omaha, but they're not bad. And maybe, if we're truthful, neither the Jewish or the Muslim community are seen as a threat. Okay? And I think Dr. Moody, and especially the people involved with us in the Tri-Faith Initiative, Dr. Moody has been in Omaha for, what, 40-some years, and all of his kids graduated from Creighton, and many of the Muslims that are involved in this have been there a long time. But, you know, I think that is a positive thing, that we don't see each other as threats there. And I think you get in the bigger cities, New York, some places like that, that's what people get upset about, because they don't see them as individuals, they see them as a threat.
We are building a neighborhood, and as Tim said, that when you wake up in the morning, your neighbors are going to be Jewish, Muslim, Christian, and you know that's who you're going to live with and discuss with it and share ideas with. And that, we think, is the founding principle, that we ought to learn to live together.
And we're starting that at a very young age. We have what we call interplay, where we have Jewish, Muslim, Christian kids that meet bi-monthly. They start at kindergarten through 5th. Now, those kids have been together for 3 years, and so some of those kids now have moved into middle school, so now we've had to start the middle school group. We always try to keep the ratio the same, because we would always, as Christians, dominate the numbers. So we try to keep that the same. But I was telling the other group, I mean, these 8, 9, 10-year-olds know more about these three faiths than 95% of the people sitting in the pews, and they like each other. And that goes through to the youth group. They have fun with each other, and they're willing to share, because we make them talk about the deep issues also. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to start at young ages. And those of you who saw the video, Wendy Goldberg is head of the religious school at Temple, and she said it right. You know, our kids aren't as afraid of each other as we are in this generation. They're just not scared of each other. But we know we just can't build walls high enough to keep one another out. So we're building these bridges. That's what we're hoping to do. Yes.
I was in the presentation, so but one of the things I thought was helpful for, you might describe to the people who haven't seen it, is the very significant and rather kind ways, for instance, on festivals and High Holy Days, you interact with one another, you know, while perhaps the other community is worshiping, and I thought,
yeah, there's lots of ways that we've tried to join one another, especially in our high holidays and our celebrations. For Rosh Hashanah, Christians and Muslims will show up at Temple, and we'll have apples and honey to pass out to the congregants as they come out of their service. The Eid al-Fitr service, when Muslims break their fast, Ramadan, Christians and Jews will be there to pass out dates. And I shared this at both the other deals, but one of my most fun experiences was this year's Eid service, and we were there getting set up to hand out the dates, and it was a Sunday, I had my collar on, and a good friend of mine, Kareem, was showing they don't have their facility, so they're holding the service in the hotel, in the lobby, and Kareem was out there showing people where to go, you know, to come into the Eid service. And the prayers were starting, and I said, well, Kareem, go into prayer, for goodness sakes. Anybody comes, I'll show them where to go. He'd no more and walked in, shut the door, and down the hall comes these two young Saudi guys. They're dressed in their, you know, their headgear and their long white robes, and they're coming down the hall, and here comes this guy in the collar, and I said, are you guys looking for the Eid service? And their eyes got this big out. They had no idea why some priest was trying to show them where their service was. But it's just, you know, wonderful thing. You know, there's so many stories we could tell. The one I didn't tell this afternoon is about Bob Freeman, who's the president, and his wife is Episcopalian, and he was talking to one of our Muslim friends, Nasser, and he said, you know, I go to church with Robin quite often, but I just have never experienced God there. And Nasser kind of looked at him, and he says, God's everywhere. You can experience God just as much in that church as you can outside or in the synagogue, whatever. God's everywhere. So Bob goes to church with Robin a couple weeks later, and he has an experience of God in the church. So his favorite story now is he says it took a Muslim to teach a Jew how to experience God in church.
I think a question over here.
That actually synthesizes the whole discussion.
That you told that story about the two Saudi guys before, and my question was, I mean, did they complain about this to anybody, or was there any pushback, or what was their ultimate?
None. Actually, what I heard later on from other people, that they were astonished, surprised, but very pleasantly so.
Yeah. When I told Dr. Moody about it, that's the first time I've seen him kind of belly laugh ever. Other questions? I don't know if there's no cookie cutter way to do this. You know that ecumenical work or interfaith work. I held up this book a couple times. I'm sure many of you have read it, but it's called Trialogue, and it really does. It has a decalogue of dialogue rules. And so even if you're just doing ecumenical work and not the interfaith work, it's really a good book. But there's a lot of good books out there. Oil and Water. But what we've found anyway is there's a real thirst. There's a real thirst among Christians and Jews and Muslims to try to learn more about each other. Try to discover ways that we can work together, do outreach things together. And we're hoping to do a lot of that when we get on the campus. We're able to do some now, but not near as much as we will be when we are really, really neighbors, and we can use the property in different ways. It's a lovely setting. It's about 45 acres. Like I said, those of you who weren't in the presentation, the temple is going to be in there for their high holy days and celebrating. They're almost done with their construction. Mosque is hoping to start maybe groundbreaking this summer, at the latest next spring. The Christian presence, and that's why we're talking about it now, is the Christian presence. We're hoping maybe late 2014, 2015, sometime in this decade. And it is the most difficult. We are the most difficult to raise the money for. I mean, we have 9 congregations already. The Lutherans have many congregations. We're really searching for people who believe this is something that has to happen, that it's good for everybody. And in fact, we've got a couple of donors that have not been involved in the Episcopal Church. And we've got a large donor from the mosque that's not Muslim. So, yes, ma'am.
The video that some of us have not seen?
Yes.
How do we access that? Is it on YouTube?
Go to our website,
What's
to
your
the
website?
trifaith.org, and it's got that 8 minutes.
Okay.
We videoed the whole thing, the whole dialogue, but we just put the 8 minutes up because it really does kind of tell our story.
Okay.
If you go to episcopaltrifaith.org, we've tried to list some resources there and some of the things that we've been doing.
Didn't you have a big article in the New York Times?
We've had a lot of articles written about
Sure,
us.
I've seen that, yeah.
But we just finished an interview with a freelance writer for Boston Globe, Harvard Law School, and I liked his one question. He said, well, where did you get all the background to do all this interfaith and ecumenical work? I mean, why are you able to do this? And I said, I was born and raised in central Nebraska. That's as vanilla as you get. We had one Jewish family and one black family in the community I was raised in. I didn't meet my first Muslim until about 9 years ago. So you don't necessarily have to be raised in an intercultural atmosphere to have a desire to do this. But I do think you have to have a love of wanting to do ministry and live out your covenant. So anybody can do it that wants to. Well, thank you for the time. I will just explain the amazing things out there in your ecumenical and interfaith work. If any of you would like to leave us your card, your business card, or come and get one of ours, we'd love to put you on our constant contact list. I'd love to be able to go to your websites and see what you're doing. We all have to share what's working and what isn't, and what's the challenges. So if you do that, that would be really beneficial to us.
Thank you very much.